Thank you, Justin. Morning, Alex.
Good morning. Hope you all are well today.
Very well, thank you.
Excellent. Good to see you, Terry.
Good to see you.
You can't see me. You just have my initials.
We do have 6 present, so we have quorum. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll call this meeting to order. And first is public comments, but Alex, I always consider you a guest, even though you're a regular. Do you have any comments for us today to think about or consider?
No, ma'am. Just that I'm looking. I may have to leave early today, and if I miss Terry's presentation, I think you all will find it very good.
Thank you.
So kind, Alex. Thank you.
All right, we'll move into action items. The first action item is, of course, review and approval of last month's minutes. Hopefully everybody had a chance to review those. Are there any edits from the committee? And my power is flashing. Great. Amy, you might have to get ready to take over. Any edits on the minutes? Hearing none, is there a move to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Maybe
Greg.
it's just one lamp. Thank you, Greg. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Donna. Anyone just show hands or say aye for those that approve.
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. All right, moving on to officer elections. I was hoping you all would take care of that last month. You had a dialogue, but there was not a formal action on the officers. So I would like to open the floor for nominations for chair.
I'll make the motion that Carol run for another term of 3 to 5 years. So
I don't accept 3 to 5 years, but I will accept 1 year, Greg.
all right. Well, at least for 2025. How about that?
All right, thank you.
Our chairman position.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
I second that.
Thank you. And those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, Donna. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, Carol will be the chair for 1 more year. Nominations for vice chair.
I'll nominate Amy Easter.
Thank you, Ned. Is there a second?
I'll second it. This is Greg.
Thank you, Greg. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Right, anyone opposed? Hearing none, Amy, you will be our vice chair for another year. All right, well, thank you all. I am honored. It has been a pleasure serving this last year, and I feel like I'm in a groove, so I will continue 1 more year, but please know that I am looking for others to step into that leadership position in the future. I think it's great for everyone to hold this position at least one time, if not additional. You learn a lot, you get exposed to a lot. And I think it's really good to spread the leadership positions around to all committee members. Everyone should experience it. And it would not mean that I would be leaving. I would continue to help in the future because I'm not walking away from this work. It's really important for our community and our state and our country. So thank you very much for the honor. Moving on, we were supposed to have Representative Brown with us today. I don't think I've seen her come on yet. It goes to two screens. Nope, she has not joined us. So since she is not on here, I would like to introduce Terry Lansell. Terry and I met, I think, in Durham during COVID. That was my first meeting that I attended of Bike Walk North Carolina, and I fell in love with the organization at that summit. Since then, I've only had the opportunity to go to one additional summit just because of scheduling. If I had the opportunity, I would go every year because the guest speakers that they bring in for us to hear are just phenomenal. As a matter of fact, this year and prior years, they have posted speakers from those summits on their website. And in my spare time, I have been trying to go in there and watch some of those presentations. And before our February planning meeting, I'm actually going to give you all a homework assignment to watch session 2, which I just watched this week. It is phenomenal. It is a gentleman, a mayor from California, who tells us how we can be better at communicating. He, in his real job, is an advocate. So he has a lot of experience with that, but I was enthralled with the presentation. It just drew me in and I listened to him and I got energized. So before our planning meeting in February, I'd like everyone to listen to that because I think this next year, and I want the whole committee to agree, but one of my thoughts for this next year is that we actually focus on safety. I think it's really important. And I think that no one can argue with safety facts, which you saw some of those in the letter that was drafted to go to the city council for the reason for reversing the language that restricts bicycle and ped funding in our state. So anyway, I got off the topic. I was introducing Terry. Terry, welcome today, and thank you for the work that you do, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Carol, thanks very much. We appreciate you and all the work that you and your organization is doing now. And I see some familiar faces there, so I don't think you're alone in partnering with Bike Walk North Carolina, but we appreciate you. I'm going to do my best to start my sharing of the screen and get into a good presentation mode here. Let's see. I think we're okay at this point. I know it's not full screen, but I'm not able to see where I can stop it at. So Terry Lansell, Bike Walk North Carolina. I was asked to join you guys today to chat about where we are and how we got to this day in history and where it looks like, what it looks like for our future together. I've given this presentation to Nick's site at their engineering conference. I've given this presentation to our board and staff. I've given this presentation to folks in Greensboro and have arrangements to present this to other organizations much like yourself across the state over the next few weeks and months, and especially as we approach the long session beginning in January. I'm eager to find out about the committee assignments and who the leadership's going to be. We know a little bit about the leadership party in the House right now, but we don't really know anything else about who's going to be doing what, where, when, and how. But each year, I wish we didn't have to do it this way, but each year we have to train new freshman senators and House of Representatives, mayors, city council members, county commissioners on the state of funding for transportation and active transportation. And it really is not so so much dictated by the Department of Transportation. They are restricted by statute in many ways about how they spend and prioritize their dollars. And I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through this presentation. But our world changed for active transportation funding in 2013 with the passage of the Strategic Transportation Investment Law. And Bike Walk North Carolina has been working to change that ever since we recognized that it had been enacted. And I'll talk a little bit more about why it took a little bit of time to get folks on board with what the impact was. As Carol said, we've got a summit each year and we work closely at the state level. We're not as engaged as you guys, right? Because we don't have that Tuesday night ride or that kind of gathering at the local level to have a meeting of the minds. We work across the state and at the policy level. So there's not a lot of opportunities outside the summit for us to kind of have group engagement. So we hope that you'll keep that in mind as we move forward throughout the year. So here we go. We're getting into the meat of it now. So where it all began back in April of 2013 in the series of about 70 days, we restructured the district-driven prioritization process that the General Assembly had used for many years to prioritize projects and fund projects across the state. A district-driven process is maybe a term you'll hear me use time and again, and that is where a specific representative or senator would pick out a project, put it into the budget, and make that project happen. Sometimes those projects were written out on a piece of paper and drawn from, I'd like to have a road from this point to this point. I know it's hard to see there. Well, drawing it on a piece of paper like that in the old days could have been enough to prioritize and fund a project. This led to a series of occurrences by the General Assembly and that caused NCDOT to face a serious judicial hurdle. And it was under the MAP Act in which that the floor for DOT funding was stripped away, and the fines that they had to pay for the way they were managing these district-driven prioritization projects. So House Bill 817 happened. There were about 8 additions, several different versions coming through. I won't go through each one, but the bill, House Bill 817, the STI, the Strategic Transportation Investments Law, started as a 2-page bill and ended up being a 60 or 70-page bill in a matter of 70 days. And that really gives an indication about where we are today as well. The same standard operating procedure for moving bills through. You may recognize this pattern in our recent Helene Recovery Omnibus Bill, where it showed up, it changed quite dramatically, and it was passed pretty quickly without a lot of public comment, without a lot of input from other committees as well. Well, in version 6, the General Assembly finally got around to paying attention to active transportation. In versions 1 through 5, bicycles and pedestrians were not a significant threat to the NCDOT budget, or to the state budget, or to representatives that did not want to get out of their vehicles or fund projects that weren't specifically vehicle prioritized. So here it is. Here's the language that was submitted. And in legal terms, we could, right? We previously to 2013, we could have projects for sidewalk gap improvements, bike lanes, greenway crossings, greenways even along like in a mixed use path, could all be eligible for a state match, which would be classified as a local match. And please feel free to drop any questions if I say anything that's not clear or outside the realm of your sphere of influence. Let me know, and I'll stop and dive deeper into it. But they changed it in a way that they use the words they changed the word from may fund bicycle pedestrian projects to shall not fund. And in legalese in North Carolina and other states, when you use the words shall or shall not, that is a legal requirement to do or not do. And having that space where it says shall not provide financial support for bicycle pedestrian improvement projects, that's a pretty big impact. That makes it pretty clear in 2013. But I want you to notice at the bottom of this section C, it says authorized for construction on 2013. And I started out by saying, you know, why did it take us a little longer to get involved in this process? And here's why. When we get to version 10 in that 70-day period, and between version 6 and 10 was more like 13 or 14 days, they changed it. They recognized that there were some projects in the pipeline that they couldn't undo, which is what they were trying to do in my recollection and my understanding the intent of the time. But this limitation shall not apply to funds authorized for projects scheduled for 2013, 2014, and 2015. So those are the projects that were in the pipeline. What does this mean for you guys at the local level? Well, your MPO didn't recognize that there's going to be a problem for 3 years. So when they started putting in projects for 2015, 2016, 2016, 2017, they were like, DOT was, and to no fault of their own, because this is a statutory requirement, DOT said, nope, we can't fund those. You are not going to be eligible for a state match. If you want those projects, you got to come up with the cash yourself. And that's really where the dilemma comes for us, especially on state roads, is that they were built poorly designed, they were under-engineered, and did not include accommodations for all transportation users. So any mistakes that NCDOT had made, the statutory requirements now eliminated DOT's responsibility to fix those on a case-by-case basis. Pretty scary, right? I mean, you may have experienced in Winston-Salem, I'm not sure. I'm saying this facetiously, but whereas there's a sidewalk on one side of the road, but not the other. Or there's not a crosswalk at an interstate, at an intersection. Maybe the sidewalk ends in front of a building or an intersection and doesn't pick back up again. But you see a cow path, which is a real term for NCDOT and transportation folks. You see a cow path where there's people using it because they have no other choice to walk on the grass or walk wherever they're going along the side of the road to get to their destination. So how did it all fall out? Well, the total votes were 117. We had 15 vote against it and 102 people vote for it. I want to put this out there because many of the same people that voted for this bill are still in office, are still managing budgets, are still managing transportation policy, are still engaged in this process. I'm going to defend some of them to a certain degree in that this bill, they didn't really understand the implications of this bill. And we didn't really understand the implications for each community across the state for a couple of years when we tried to have more and more projects submitted into the STI for those fixes, for those projects that at the division level that people wanted, would use, and needed to make their transportation choices safer. So here it is in a simple nutshell here. Pretty easy to read, right? This is the STI law. It's an easy bill to understand that it's 3 categories: state, regional, and divisional needs. It is a cascading tier of prioritization funding. So if there's too much money requested for the state section, the statewide mobility segment, they start stealing money from the regional division funding. And when that budget gets too much, they'll take funds from the divisional level funding. Well, Bike Ped was only eligible for divisional level funding. And as you can see from this chart, federal funded projects which do not require state funds are the only divisional projects that will be considered for bicycle pedestrian funding. And at the bottom, you see no state funds can be used for bicycle pedestrian projects. Well, I could see Ryan down there in the bottom. He's going, well, come on, something has changed, right? We can't have done this. This cannot have stood for 11 years now. There's got to be somebody who's done something about this to make this change. Well, as a reminder, there it is and highlighted. We tried, and we've been trying to make that change. In 2021, we were so frustrated with leadership at the House and Senate to understand what this meant to funding at the regional level, the division level, and for NCDOT to provide projects that people want, need, and would use. We wrote the bill and had great support to push this bill forward in the House as an informational bill. In 2021, we had a standalone bill. We had this mentioned in a House budget. We had this mentioned in a state budget, and we had this mentioned in the governor's budget. Didn't happen. It was removed at the last minute, and we didn't have any movement in making changes to the STI law in 2021. We continue to work on this. We continue to educate and inform our policymakers about the impact of this to their divisions, to their districts, to their community, to their neighborhood. And we've done that over the past 3 years as well. We continue to move it forward. We continue to find out where the roadblocks are. But each year, it's always included in some consideration in the General Assembly, short session or long session, up until the final committees. This year, we had worked and tried a different tack. We wanted to go through committee, and we wanted to have DOT on board with this. So we petitioned DOT to add this to their legislative agenda, something that DOT had not done ever since 2013. So we had it included in House Bill 198 in June of this year. Again, just trying to explain to them that it's not going to be a specific line item in the budget, but it is a policy that allows bicycle pedestrian projects to be considered as part of the strategic transportation investment formula. We're not asking for money at this point, but we got to have a place at the table. And I'll explain a couple of reasons why in a few slides. So as I said, I could feel Ryan over in the corner there for me. Something has to have changed. Well, in October, in a presentation to the strategic prioritization formula that's a SPOT 7.0. If anybody understands, it's every 2 years we provide a prioritization of projects that DOT evaluates and chooses to fund or not fund. That's an oversimplification, Alex. Sorry about that. But it's real. And this is their presentation. This is their slide. So we'll fund highways, we'll fund aviation in all the categories. We'll fund rail in all the categories. But bicycle pedestrian? No. That's the reality for NCDOT at this point. And they go one step further. Just in October, all projects, 0 state highway trust fund dollars shall go to bicycle pedestrian projects. What in the world? How can we provide a safe, equitable, sustainable transportation system that directly excludes all forms of transportation in their funding? That's what we do. That's why we're working, but that's why we need your help. Because every municipality in North Carolina around or above 100,000 usually has a legislative agenda set. They have a budget setting process. I think that's where we want to make sure that we're talking about our elected officials sharing their direct impact on what this law does to them and their ability to provide services and projects at the local level. A few years back, we had a gentleman in the Piedmont present a bill about we need to register all bicycles that are sold in North Carolina. And for $10, you have to have a registration plate. You have to do all this process because there was a perception that bicycles do not contribute to the highway fund or the general fund for transportation projects. And that's just not true. We successfully, through partnerships, Amy, I think you were a part of this as well during that time, but we successfully fought that registration bill. But what's happened now, because of the mention, I made mention of the MAP Act and InterDOT's inability to remain solvent after a judicial fine, the General Assembly has opened up the general funds to fund the Highway Trust Fund, or transportation dollars. So that means every bike under the Christmas tree this Christmas will go to pay for a road in North Carolina's Department of Transportation that shall not be accommodated with a bicycle lane or a bicycle accommodation or a sidewalk or a mixed use path that is a standalone project. So it puts all the responsibility back on Winston-Salem to pay for everything it wants to do that's not a roadway car specific project. So now this year we're going into 2024, we're about 4.5% of the general fund, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars over a series of 10 years will be pulled out of the general fund and go directly into the Highway Trust Fund without the ability for the Department of Transportation to fund bicycle pedestrian projects. That's why this is important for us to make sure we all understand this. And I'm giving you a graduate level presentation here because I want you to understand when we're talking about problems and why things aren't getting done, that we're pointing at the right people, that we're identifying where the problem is rather than the symptom. And I think that's what I'm trying to do now, is to help you understand it. It's not Alex's fault. Alex is restricted by law about what projects, as a representative, forgive me, Alex, but as a representative of NCDOT, can and can't fund in the STI process. I petitioned our state treasurer over the past couple of years as well. I created a Freedom of Information Act and I said, well, we do pay for the general fund, right? We do pay for the highway fund prior to the access to the general fund. And this information from the Department of Revenue confirms this. And this has been the case since well before 2013, where motorcycle and bicycle dealers pay directly into the automotive group of the highway fund and the general fund. So in this one, in September alone, motorcycle and bicycle dealers, not the Walmarts, not the Dick's Sporting Goods, the REIs, those are not specific bicycle dealers. That goes into the general fund for that tax revenue and is pulled out and transferred over at that rate I just mentioned, 4.5% to the highway fund. Well, that's taxable purchases between motorcycle and bicycle dealers in North Carolina was $35 million last September alone. That's a significant amount of money that we're not getting a return on investment for, because the Strategic Transportation Investment Law says that DOT shall not provide funding for standalone bicycle pedestrian projects. I know this is hard to kind of get through. It's the reality that we're dealing with. To me, it's still shocking to hear the words that I have to say to explain it, that this has been done and continues to be in place in North Carolina. But we also want to kind of chat a little bit about what happens, right? We talked about it puts all the responsibility on folks like Winston-Salem or Greensboro or Charlotte or Raleigh to pay for those specific accommodations that need to be fixed on state roads, that missing gap of sidewalk, that intersection improvement that didn't have a crosswalk installed. Those are issues, those are projects, examples of projects that cannot be funded with state dollars, even though they were poorly designed and poorly engineered on prior funding cycles. Well, in North Carolina, during this last election, hopefully everybody voted in this last election. We had 95% of the transportation ballot measures for active transportation were approved in North Carolina. Cary was the only one that did not pass their transportation bond. They didn't pass their transportation or housing bond in Cary. Everybody else, and to the tune of across the state, $2.7 billion. So let's just say, DOT needs a number, or General Assembly needs a number. This is what our local investment is willing to pay and commit to fix the problems that DOT left us with through the General Assembly's statutory rule. So we're willing to tax ourselves to make these corrections, but we're still not able to access state funds because of that strategic transportation investment law. So this election alone in North Carolina, just this year, and that we committed to tax ourselves $660 million. Pretty amazing stuff that if anybody needs any data of record, that this is what we want and need, but we're limited by our ability at NCDOT to access those funds. But at a drop of a hat, they can come up with $2.4 billion to complete an interstate or to build a bridge, but we can't fix a sidewalk, make a crosswalk safe, build a bike lane in your community. That's an issue for Bike Walk North Carolina because we see people dying in North Carolina 7 times more likely to die with shoes on your feet than with wheels on your feet. But we're still not able to use transportation dollars to make it easier. This is going to go away soon. Hopefully, if you attended our summit this year, it's available online. I'll be glad to share this presentation with Carol and you guys afterwards. But this is an interesting dynamic here in that what we see in this particular map is the North Carolina divisions. If you think of it as a Venn diagram, you see the North Carolina divisions are the big circles, and then each of the House and Senate districts are smaller circles within those big ones, those big sections. The interesting thing is that when we talk about how districts are drawn, the leadership in the House and Senate, for the majority of them, their Senate and House districts cross over into 2 NCDOT divisions. So they're able to influence 2 divisions by 1 single representative. And that is a ticker up for
Terry,
what...
I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? I didn't catch it, or I didn't process that.
Sure. So an NCDOT division is the is the big circle. And then within that big circle of NCDOT divisions, there are House districts, right? So House District 105 or 16. And then there are Senate districts that are within that division map, right? So, for example, let's just take a look at, I'm going to struggle to get one quickly, but Senator Rabin on the coast here, his district, his Senate district, crosses over between NCDOT Division 6 and NCDOT Division 3. Senator Sawyer in Iredell County, her district comes into Mecklenburg County as well. So she has District 12 and District 10. I mention those 2 because both of them either are or have been chairs of the Transportation and Budget Committees. So that's how we see a real situation for how power is consolidated based upon Senate and House district redistricting and its application to the NCDOT divisions. And these divisions haven't changed in many, many years. We talked about that recently in another group, but it's been 20 or 30 years since we've changed NCDOT divisions. But the House and Senate districts continue to change in North Carolina. And we see that kind of structuring around that for those transportation hawks that control the transportation budget and policy making. Thanks, Amy, for that. Did that get you a little there?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
we'll share that with you as well, so you can kind of dive into it. But you'll see who crosses over in your NCDOT divisions as well. That's it for me. I'd really hoped that we had a representative here today because there is one more thing that we wanted to share with you. And I was hoping to have you guys help me with your representation to say that we need to have more local bills written. This is an example of a local bill from Senator Sawyer that I wanted to share with you. So because of the bicycle pedestrian funding limitation from the STI law in 2013, we have to have workarounds. And Senator Sawyer has given us a great example of a workaround. So she has written a bill. There is an appropriated from the general fund, $600,000 in non-recurring funds directed to the town of Davidson to improve pedestrian safety, providing enhanced sidewalks, installing flashing beacons, raising and widening sidewalks at various locations to the town. $600,000 was requested in the budget. How much money do you think they got? Anybody? More, less? Up or down? Somebody can do something. That's right. That's right. They asked for 600. They got $1 million. But you know, the town of Davidson is a massive population center, though, isn't it? I think their population is 14,125. So if we can get your local representatives in the General Assembly to recognize that they have the power and the capacity to write local bills to have workarounds, before we have the bicycle pedestrian funding limitation repealed, we may see improvements for Winston-Salem and other cities who choose to have strong leadership and educated and informed leadership about the bureaucratic process that is required to have direct allocations to their district. But what does it mean for us? We've got to give your representation some support. And I think this is where as I wrap up here, this is where we need to come back to you guys. Anything we can do to educate your county commission and your city council members, and you've got a great ally in Dan Bessie there, I believe. We need to have their support to say that this is a real issue for us as we approach the long session, that we would like to see some work to be done to repeal the bicycle pedestrian funding limitation and give us access, at least consideration at least, to funds available to every other road and transportation project and division in North Carolina. Bicycle pedestrians should not be excluded from transportation funding at the Department of Transportation, but it should be included in NCDOT funding. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm glad to talk specific questions. I think I've flown through there, but I've taken far too much time, I think. But I really wanted to give you guys an abridged version to say that things changed in 2013. We didn't recognize the impact until 2016. And we can't continue to have NCDOT reject funding opportunities in your community because of this outdated, unfamiliar law that happened in 2013. I appreciate your time. I'll answer any questions and love to be a part of the conversation as you move forward and possibly prepare a letter to request this to be added to the local budgets and legislative agenda in your community. Thanks.
Terry, this is Greg Garrett down at the bottom of my screen at least. I wanted to ask about those funds that the town of Davidson received. Can those cannot be used on state maintained roads? Is it only local roads that are not part of the PAL bill system?
Because they're at 14,000, their Power Bill funds are pretty limited.
Yeah.
Right. So it is eligible for any sidewalk pedestrian project, and they will be used. And it's my understanding that they'll be used for the local match. So that $1 million that they were allocated in the budget, that could essentially turn into, if it was a 20% match requirement for a federal project, that could turn into quite a bit of dollars that just this town of 14,000 now has the access of funds to. And it had to come from the general fund because this funding match could not come from the state, from the Department of Transportation.
Right.
And
Okay.
it can be used on state roads. It can be used on local roads. It can be used on any road in the town of Davidson.
So it could be used for a STIP project? as a supplement to a STIP project or an add-on to that then, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
It's interesting, okay.
But it's a workaround, right? It's a
Terry, how
work-
many other local bills like this have been executed?
Well, we had several in this last General Assembly, one of which I think it went to the tune of around $38 million to the town of Mint Hill. It was a very contentious race in House District 105. So the range is out there. There are in the bills, I'm not going to be able to, might be able to do this if I can get it over there. Let's see.
I think for me, I'm just trying to understand the feasibility of introducing, and that's, I'm imagining is a longer discussion, but high level, like, what is the process of introducing a local bill? What is the timing of it? And then what is the overall likelihood of it even passing? And I know those are very complex and nuanced things, but if this is, and again, this is a Band-Aid, this is not fixing the ultimate underlying problem, which has got to be changed. But if it's another option, just trying to understand, what goes into making something like that happen.
Sure. Well, local bills could take all kinds of different forms, right? They can be for an exception to automated traffic enforcement. So if your community wanted to have red light cameras or speed cameras, they would have to write a local bill to ask for an exception to that. Greensboro did that, but they're struggling a little bit how to implement that, right? So they asked for it, they got it, and through a local bill. The local bills need to be in legislators' pockets on day one. They need to have drafts on day one about that represent the needs of their district. In my mind, if I was there and as a representative, I would want to have a series of local bills, and I'm transportation focused, of course, right? We're going to stick with this issue for today. But I would have bills ready to go. I would have specific projects lined up because in our budget, we have examples of these kinds of things. I see sidewalks here is one in the neighborhood revitalization section. We can have specific budget allocations for specific projects. They'll present themselves as a local bill, Amy, so that the people in appropriations and transportation or whatever committee it falls into can understand the needs of the district. So they may be a standalone bill when they call for local bills at the later end of the session, but if they're submitted, they're often considered for the budget inclusion. So they gather up, they have all these bills, these local bills, and they gather them up and they tally them up. Well, this is Winston-Salem, this is Greensboro, this is Wilmington. Okay, we've got all these requests for funding, and then they put them in a list like you see here for grants and other things that they keep a running tally of, and then it goes into the budget, potentially goes into the budget. Having your representative on appropriations is going to be critical to that. She can fight for it and push it forward, and it will be hopefully considered in the budget before the end of the session. It's a biennium budget, so it takes a year to make that happen. So there's the timing. So having your representative do it early, having things prepared early, that's what we're trying to do for you now, will impact the success of it as well. And it can be specific project-based, it can be grouping for communities. As you've seen, we have an example of a water improvement for a greenway, and then you have an example for a town to get allocated a specific amount of money to do with what they will. So those are the kinds of pieces that we're trying to get to. But we have to give our representatives support. And that's where the municipality and adding it to the legislative agenda comes into play. When your representative goes in there with a local bill and says, hey, I've got it right here. Here's my legislative agenda request from the city council in Winston-Salem. This is an issue for us, and this is going to help solve that if we can't repeal the bicycle pedestrian funding limitation as it stands. So we give them we give them a little room to ask for things, but we also give them a chance to not have it all on one bill, right? So if they lose the bike ped funding limitation battle, they still have an opportunity to gain funds for the community. If they win the bicycle pedestrian funding limitation, we don't necessarily need those funds as a priority in this budget cycle.
Terry, you said it has to be ready day one. So are we too late for 2025?
No, I said if that was me, and that's why this is important. We have these conversations with our legislators at the beginning of the session to say this is an important issue, right? We have to be the squeaky wheel now, because if we get later into the session and we don't have municipal support for it, it becomes harder for them to gain momentum and find a successful path to get this language into a variety of bills. And the thing of it is, for me, I didn't really talk about it, but we've had our repeal and for the funding limitation in budgets and standalone bills, DOT legislative bills. We've had it in omnibus bills. So it doesn't have to fit into any category, right? The notion that we would have a Helene recovery omnibus bill that had a clause in there about having a landowner sign off on a rezoning petition has nothing to do with Helene recovery. We know that it can fit into a wide variety of bills throughout there. But if they don't know from the beginning, they may miss an opportunity to find a place for that language to be inserted. Does that help, Carol? Thanks for the clarification on that. What we're trying to do is we're having a team meeting, right? If you have a football game, this is the team plan. This is the plan. We're gonna run this offense for a while, and then we're gonna run defense a little bit later. So
I want to go back to, you said that if we prepare, well, we've prepared a letter. The thought was to take it to the city manager, the city council, and the mayor, but you mentioned the county. And again, I get confused on the county because usually they're not involved in the transportation process. I do know that they do have a representative on the Transportation Advisory Committee, but why would we send the letter to the county? Remind me.
Sure. So we're trying to get that local support. So you guys have greenways?
Yes.
You have greenways that cross roadways.
Yes.
You have greenways that cross roadways that may need improvements for safety.
Yes.
There you go. You got a county project, a county land situation that interacts with a state road where that funding is all on you to correct issues on the state road.
Thank you for reminding me. I was also thinking the other day that in addition to the city and now the county, that we do have a state Senate representative, and we do have actually four different House representatives that split Winston-Salem. Should the letter also be sent to them?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And if you have a chance to send it to your MPO chair, your Metropolitan Planning Organization chair, that would be a good person to copy with as well. We had, when we made our first big effort to repeal the bicycle pedestrian funding limitation, we had 12 resolutions from individual MPOs and RPOs talking about the impact of the bicycle pedestrian funding limitation as well. They're your great public-private partnership allies, right? Because your MPO is made of staff and elected officials. So, for example, I don't know how your structure is for your MPO. My apologies for not being prepared on that. But in some MPOs, the mayor serves as the chair of an MPO or has a duly designated representative from your council as a voting member, sometimes a weighted voting member on your MPO. So if your representative from city council gets a letter about this, and the MPO gets a letter about this, and your county representative, maybe in Greenways, who serves on the MPO as well, gets a letter about this. It comes from a place of home rather than a place of an outsider coming in, right? It's an organic flow through the process. And everybody should understand what it means locally that this law is doing and not allowing the opportunity.
Thank you.
And you're not alone in this. I'll say this, last year we tried this as well. We appreciated the work, but we had it in a half a dozen municipalities across the state who had these letters in place and added it to their legislative agenda. It was a part of our success with NCDOT to take this on as well, because we were showing support at the local level.
Is there any confusion, I use that term loosely, with the Great Trails state funding and greenways and trails? Do people think that because they have granted millions of dollars to the Great Trails state that they are covering greenways and trails that should not be appropriated through this? Am I asking that correctly?
You are. That's a good question. Trails, we at Bike Walk, North Carolina, we're not just about on road. We're not just about that bike lane on this particular road. It's about all types of active transportation and being safe and having choices in their transportation modes. Now, the Great Trail State did get $50 million in non-recurring funding. I think that was the case there.
It was
last year from the Department of Natural Resources, Culture and Natural Resources. $50 million. How many counties do we have?
100.
Okay, everybody gets $5 million. How much does it cost to build a mile of sidewalk in Winston-Salem?
2.5 million.
Okay. All right. Doesn't hurt. We'd love to have that recurring funds. We'd love to have our bicycle pedestrian limitation repealed to give us access to that match again, so that we can capitalize on all federal dollars available for intersection transportation improvements for greenways, sidewalks, along and inside roadway right-of-way. You see the connections now, or am I kind of circling back around, giving you the opportunity? We are not in competition. And if you really want to go one step further, we had a great trail state plan, which was the impetus to create the coalition that Bike Walk North Carolina is a part of as well. But DOT passed that plan. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to touch it in real time, but in this plan that they approved in 2012, Section 6 was removed, except for they didn't scrub it completely. In the appendix, it says Section 6 is the financial and budget outline for the Great Trail State. So they passed the plan, they passed the policy to support it, but they scrubbed all funding for that Great Trail State plan. So it took a coalition of us, and still takes a coalition of us, to push for that, get us some funding back, give us some funding back, because NCDOT is not able to fund bicycle pedestrian accommodations through the STI. It must come from other sources. Sorry, I'm being a bit hard here. I feel like I'm a bit pointed here, but I feel like you guys are testing me on some good questions, and I think I can validate most everything that I've stated here today with references for you in pretty short order. And I'll certainly, as I stick around, you might be seeing some things show up in the chat as well.
Well, I appreciate you coming today. Are there any further questions for Terry today?
I had one question. First of all, thank you so much, Terry. This is really great information. And you said you might be able to share this presentation with us. That's great.
Yep, yep.
Help me understand, in the original House bill, it said that, maybe I misunderstood, but it says that that funds shall not be, or state funds shall not be offered unless there are federal, there's like a limited to only federal DOT projects. Is that correct?
Right.
So do you know how much federal allocation North Carolina received? And how is that, where are those monies being placed, and who gets access to that?
Terry, would that be easier with an example? And Ben, would our Long Branch Trail extension be an example of that?
That's a great example, Carol. So Ned, our Long Branch Trail extension used RAISE grant funding, federal Department of Transportation funding, about $6 million worth of funding for that project. And there's all kinds of different funding programs. Some of them are, the bicycle and pedestrian projects are not eligible for all federal DOT funding programs, but there's different pots of money for different types of projects.
So many of us, oh, go ahead.
So if there was a federal DOT project, we could access some state dollars. Is that possible? Is that what that bill is saying?
No. Right. And here's the definition of a local match at the federal level can come from municipalities or from the state. So for the state, it will not provide the match for federal funded projects. It'll give all the federal dollars you request straight to the MPOs, municipalities for the projects. But the local match for this particular instance has to come from the municipality, not from the state.
And that other states allow the state funding to be that local match.
Correct.
But because of the language in this bill, the state funds cannot be used at all for any standalone bicycle pedestrian project.
Shall not provide financial support for federal and local government funded independent bicycle pedestrian projects. Shall not.
Okay.
But
So
the state defines local matches as state or local, state or municipality. So there's the same words with a different definition.
And Ned, I'm only 2 or 3 years ahead of you on this information, and it took me a while to really grasp this language. I don't know how many different times Terry had to meet with me and drill this into my head to completely understand it.
It'll take me twice as long. So thanks.
No, I don't think so. Yeah. And I would also like to add the last 2 times STIP funding has become that we've done the exercises like we did this last year with the STIP funding and the prioritization of points to different projects. The last 2 times this has happened, there have been no dollars available at the divisional level. So even if this language would say may, because of the way the dollars are distributed through that tiered system, if the dollars run out in the first round or the second round, nothing comes to the divisional level. So even if we get this changed, it would be very beneficial, but we still have to have more dollars flow down to that divisional level.
That's a different argument all in itself.
Yep.
And here's the rub against that one as well. And hopefully someone with MPO experience there can help guide me on this. But the MPOs give a prioritization score, a metric for all projects. Bicycle pedestrian are included in the MPO process. They are included in prioritization and fiscally constrained project prioritization for transportation plans. But when they leave and go to the state for evaluation in this STIP, in the spot 7.0 process, they're removed and not eligible unless they are a part of an existing roadway project. And the way Complete Streets is designed, it's not part of the letting of the project by NCDOT. It only comes in when it gets into the engineering phase. So what happens when you don't include Complete Streets policies in the letting of the project? They secure a right-of-way that's X amount wide to build Y amount of lanes of roadway. Oh, and you want to put sidewalks or bike lanes in there? We didn't accommodate that because it wasn't in the letting of the project. So it's going to cost doubly more to get more right-of-way for that. So it purposely sets us up to be in a conflict scenario for over or under budgeting roadway projects to include facilities for all. That's another conversation. That's an NCDOT piece. We're trying to protect them as much as we can on that on this issue right now, because we need to give them a seat at the table again. We need to give your MPOs and RPOs a seat at the table again to make sure that the metrics and ranking process that happens at the MPO and RPO level translates to the state prioritization process. And right now there's a pretty big moat between those two.
Yep. Any other questions for Terry? Because I do want to have time to take a look at the letter and ask for revisions to it and see if we can get that approved today.
I wanted to ask Terry real quickly, how does this law affect the bike and ped staffing at the NCDOT level? How are they able to do any projects? I mean, almost like, what is the purpose of that division or that department if they have absolutely no juice to be able to spread around, I guess. So I'm just wondering how are those folks able to do their job, really?
The only budget that for the bicycle pedestrian department in North Carolina Department of Transportation, the only funding available is for the staff.
It's just for staff.
Payment of the salaries for staff. There are a couple of programs that they do operate. They're an oversight for Complete Streets. They handle the helmet initiative for the special license plate. They handle safe routes to school grants and initiatives and curriculums in schools.
Okay.
And we're looking at, I think it's, I'll have to get back to you on this one, but it's like $780,000 for the staff. And it's all for salaries.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
yeah.
Okay. All right.
I dropped the link into the link into the Great Trail State Plan, and I challenge you to look for Section 6. So sorry, someone was going to ask a question or make a comment.
I just wanted to say I went to this year's bike summit and it was great. I still have the socks, the free socks you were getting. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks very much. Glad you were here, and we would love to have you all there as well. This year we're going to be having it in Hickory, maybe the end of August, early in September. We're excited to have it in Hickory and support Western North Carolina. It'll be about a year after Helene. And we really want to talk about the importance of using FEMA recovery funds and the implementation of permanent transportation projects to build back better. Because FEMA doesn't have to, using transportation funds for FEMA to open roads after damage is not a requirement to build back better. But when you have a roadway that's being reconstructed with FEMA funds in a permanent structure, we have the opportunity to make sure that sidewalks are on bridges, bike lanes are on bridges. We're not just building things back for cars alone, but that's another issue in itself. But thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Terry.
I just wanted to, real quick, not a question. I have a million more questions, and ideas. But I just wanted to give a big kudos to Terry. It's nice to see Terry. It's been years since I've seen you. I've dropped off the bandwagon a little bit with my direct contact with Bike Walk and See. But those folks, Terry and other board members, have been working at this stuff for a long time. And for me, at least, it can be very depressing to see the state of things and the uphill battle we have. And yet there are wins, and it could be so much worse if we didn't have people in our corner constantly pushing on things, digging in and finding the loopholes and doing all the things. So just a big shout out to Terry and the team at Bike Walk and See. And also that you guys are our statewide advocacy, because, you know, we've got Winston doing this, we got Greensboro, we got and all those are great, important things, but you also need kind of this umbrella organization that's going to be able to help everybody see our connection to each other and work in like a concerted effort, you know? So just want to say big props and thank you to Terry and the Bike Walk and See team for all your continued work.
Thank you for the kind words, Amy.
And another shout out for Terry. Thank you, Amy, very much. He holds a monthly advocacy meeting. And I do think that I sent a communication to you all and a lot of others that it is open for anyone to join. It's the third Thursday at 11:30. And I can send that information out to everyone again after this meeting, just so you have that, and hopefully you'll join. It's 45 minutes. It's very short. It's right at lunch. Starts at 11:15, I think, not 11:30, and runs to 12. And it has people from across the state. So I've been able to meet people on that call, and you can learn about the initiatives that are going on in the other cities across the state. And it's just a great place to meet and share ideas and information. So thank you for holding that. And I'll also put a plug in, if you can, please join the membership and donate.
Thank you.
So one other thing that I learned in last Thursday's meeting, and I thought it was a great point, Terry, you mentioned this, but not only when we meet with representatives and go in with our conversation on safety and active transportation. One other thing that helps in that meeting is making a small gift to the representative after we've met with them, because they need money to run for that office and that position, and donations help. So I am learning that money speaks. I hate it, but money speaks. So, but I thought that was a great idea as well. All right, let's move over to the letter. Terry, if you quit sharing, I'll bring the letter up. Ben, thank you for sending the letter out. See how that looks. Actually, let me stop. I think I did that wrong. Well, now I don't see how to stop. Windows. All right, I guess I'm there. Is it sharing? No, okay.
I don't see it.
All right, let me try again.
I just
coming
see
up?
the CH for Carol Hoover. Oh, okay. I see the letter now.
Okay, good. The only edits I received after this went out were from Amy, and I thought that they were great suggestions to edit these two sentences that are in red. I cannot lie, I do use a chatbot to help me with my writing, which helps tremendously. So the chatbot was also suggesting a few additional changes to the letter that I sent out originally. But it was just wording changes. So nothing dramatically has changed from the letter. It's just a few edits. So I'm going to give you a chance to read what you see here, and then I'll scroll down and I'll ask for any additional edits that we need to make. And then I want to talk about who we send this to. I think it has to be tailored if we go to some of the different groups, but I don't think it has to be tailored much. And Terry, by all means, if you have any suggestions, please throw those out. All right, I'm going to scroll down just a little bit.
Carol, the only other thing I'm thinking that might be, I don't know, it's a bit of a zing, but I mean, the fact that this restriction has been in place for over a decade, you know, even if it was fixed today, we still have, you know, a decade's worth of lost progress. A decade, you know, and everybody who's a part of transportation knows the pace at which it moves for some reasonable reasons and others not. But I don't know if that's valuable to add in there anywhere, or if it's just more my sentiment having, you know, been reacclimated via Terry's presentation. But just that the fact, I think it makes it more important, you know, that we do just keep pushing to fix this, because it's not like we're asking for something new that's going to drastically improve things and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know. Does that make sense to others? Anyone think that's a valued add? Or otherwise, I think the letter is amazing just as is. So,
okay, I'm going to scroll down just a little bit more. And that probably would go into the first paragraph, I'm guessing.
yeah, I think so. Or even tacking on to one of those sentences that I suggested tweaking, just because I think it talks about this would enable us to start funding, blah, blah, blah. And maybe there's a way to put in there about, you know, begin to address the decades backlog of, and it's not even a backlog, it's just lost progress. Like,
Okay. All right, any other suggestions, comments for the letter? All right, so with that one edit, and I'll figure out how to get that incorporated, is there a recommendation to approve this letter?
I would motion to approve the letter with those edits.
Is there a second?
I'd second it.
Thank you, John. Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, timing, help me just a little bit. I mean, we're moving into the holidays. Would it be best to wait until the first of the year to send this out? I know our city council is meeting like January 6th or something like that. Do we need it ahead of that meeting? I really don't quite understand the timing of things. Does anyone have a suggestion? And Terry, do you know?
So if your retreat is January 6th, I'd love for it to be in the hands of your city council before January 6th. That's the only real deadline that would be out there. I'm not sure when the county goes to their retreat for you guys for Forsyth, but certainly if it goes to the city before then, that would be a good timing for that. And we were able to do that. Yeah.
It's not a retreat, it's their first meeting of the year with all the new city council.
So the retreats thereafter, when is, or has the budget setting retreat or planning?
I just looked at that. So, okay, I'll go back and look at the date of that, because I did see that posted. And we'll make sure it's in their hands before then.
Now, Kara, I would recommend just sending it whenever we have it ready this year, and then we can send a follow-up in January as appropriate and say, we provided this in December. We really hope you can consider it as you meet on X date. Like, because you know, there might be somebody who's going to sit and read it at some point, and we can just bring it back to their attention in the new year.
Okay.
And that way it's off your plate. You got it out, and then we can work on following up as needed.
Okay. Let me stop sharing. Right.
And thank you, Carol, for pulling that together, chat GPT, whatever or not. I think it was good.
Yeah, Carol, that was great. Appreciate that.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Amy. All right. Do you think that we should send this letter also to the county? And I'll think about the wording on it and may have to do some edits to get it prepared for the county. See some head nods.
Yes.
Okay. Should we also send it to our House of Representatives that represent us and the senator that represents us?
I guess.
Little head nods. Terry saying yes. And I also heard him say to send it to the chair of the MUP. So is everybody in agreement with that as well? All right. There may need to be a little bit of tweaking. So I'll have to look at the language.
Carol, did you mean the chair of the MPO instead of the MUP?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. I do have MUP on my mind.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you all for that. And I will work on getting it out to all those groups. So I appreciate that.
Hey, Terry, excuse me, Carol. Terry, I have one more question for you. I think a couple members were asking about resources, and you shared one in the chat. I saw some of those resolutions the RPOs had submitted in like a document. They're all together. Do you have any more resources like where members could find different types of resolutions or those bills kind of all in one location?
I can send you, Ben, I can send you the master document to Carol, and that's from 2019. That was when we made our first big push to that. So it gives it from the MPO RPO. We've had a couple add-ons from there, but it gives you the foundation for that.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, to finish things up, 2025, we're moving into that rapidly. It's hard to believe that the year's almost over. In January, we will meet as normal. And then in February, we'd like to do a planning meeting if everyone is on board with that. It would be a 2-hour meeting. And Ben, have you sent the poll out for those meetings yet?
I have not. That should be sent out this week, though.
Okay. And in that poll, you'll be selecting days and times for that meeting. So be prepared in February. We do want to try to do a planning meeting to think about what we want to accomplish this coming year. And as you could see in the language that I added to that letter, one of my focuses really is on safety. I think safety is the message where we can get people to believe in the work that we're doing and to support it. It's hard to argue with someone over the fact that by building things better, we will save lives and reduce injuries. It's really hard to argue with that. So anyway, be thinking about that, and I'll send that link to, Terry actually put it in there, but I'll send the direct link to that particular presentation and ask in your free time if you could watch that. It would help all of us in our ability to communicate, especially when we're meeting with different council members, mayors, the TAC, anybody that we're talking to, actually. So thank you for that. Last two things I wanted to bring up. Ben, can you share about the walking stick? I'm going to pick on Ben for these last few things.
Yeah, we just printed the plaque that will go in Salem Marina Center for the walking stick, and then we're gonna try to get everything mounted in the next week or so. So it should be able to be viewed by the public and everybody on the committee the next few weeks.
Very good. The second thing I wanted to ask you to talk to us about is the MUP. We've got the Cherry Street, Marshall Street exit closed for a unknown period of time because they're working on the MUP. I actually took a friend out this last Saturday and walked the MUP all the way from the Peters Creek Bridge, where it goes over. Well, actually, we walked over to whatever street that is over there. I forget, but we walked the tunnel over to that. I know Greg mentioned this last week. Turned around, walked all the way back as far as we could the other way. It is amazing that the work that they have done with that and how complete it is already. So Ben, can you give us a
Away. So
yeah. Well, it's
Well, they tend to
fabulous.
be also like somewhat usable before they're like
Yeah.
spick and span landscape pretty done, you know. Ben, we had talked at some point, it might have been one of our little smaller group planning meetings, about figuring out a name for the multi-use path. I don't remember where we left that, but is that anything the city can drive the bus on, so to speak? Because like we really need to get a name for that, and I don't know who should come up with it and what it should be, but
yeah,
like,
it's
could
funny
our
you mention
marketing
that.
team work on that?
I just talked to our director about that, and he thought that this committee would be great for recommending a name.
Oh,
So
geez. Okay, guys, put on your
ball's in
creativity
your court
hats
now.
over the holidays and come up with an interesting name.
Or do we have a contest like they did for the Salem Parkway?
That's what I wondered, if there'd be a way to engage the community and also let people know where it's at, because some people aren't familiar with the project. Some people are familiar with it from 10 years ago and it's actually happening, and they might be excited to hear that. ChatGPT would probably give us a great name. So if worst comes to worst, but yeah, I don't know. But yeah, I guess this committee, we can brainstorm if we have ideas, bubble them up. But I didn't know if the city would want to do anything more kind of external public, whatever.
Yeah, I think committee could come up with a handful of names, and then we could toss it out to the public, and
Okay.
after that, see what kind of comes out on top.
All right. Thank you. And talk to us this week. There was a lot of information on the grounds that came out. They had their groundbreaking, and I was reading a little bit of the article, but can you talk to us about the trails with or greenway that comes along with the grounds?
Yeah, yeah, as part of that development, they're going to be constructing a greenway that kind of runs the whole length of the development, and the goal kind of more long term is to have that greenway connect to Wake Forest main campus, to their sports complex, and then the city just submitted a planning study for funding that will study a connection between where the Long Branch Trail extension will end at 25th Street, connecting through that neighborhood to the trail on Wake Forest property. So the long-term goal is to have a off-street bicycle pedestrian connection facility connecting Wake Forest to downtown. So.
Question, one of the things I saw was a crosswalk across University to connect to Wake Forest. Is that true, or will it be a pedestrian bridge?
I believe it will be both, but I need to maybe look into that a little more. I know there's a bridge that I think that might be a longer term solution for that road. But yeah, I have reviewed plans for a crosswalk as well, so.
Okay. And the study that the city's paying for to look at that, will anyone from the committee be involved in that?
Yeah, I think that definitely the committee can weigh in on what kind of comes out of that study and some of the recommendations. And certainly as the study progresses, the committee will have an opportunity.
And you said it was awarded. Who is doing that?
We just submitted it for MPO funding, so it hasn't been awarded yet.
Okay.
It most likely will be. There's not a lot of competition in that pool of money. So stay tuned on that.
So that's why the CMAQ was opened back up?
It's not a CMAQ, it's a different fund that we use for studies, more
Okay.
yeah, a little more refined than the CMAQ.
Terry, thank you. All right. Thank you all. Fun-filled meeting once again. I wish you all a very happy holiday season. I know this is a busy time, so I thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to attend this meeting. And I'll see you back in January. Thanks for all your input and feedback.
Thanks,
Merry
everyone.
Christmas,
Yeah.
everybody. And Carol,
Everybody have a good holidays.
Carol, you did a great job with this meeting. It was very informative. I really enjoyed it. So
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, y'all.
take care, everyone.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.